The bottle shattered against Mr. Obi's temple with a sound like breaking ice, and for one perfect, crystalline moment, Sarah felt nothing but the hot rush of survival flooding her veins. Blood bloomed across her father's face, dark, wet, satisfying, and his hands, those terrible hands that had reached for her skirt with drunken entitlement, fell away. "You bitch!" he slurred, staggering backward into the kitchen table. Empty soju bottles clattered to the floor. "I raised you, fed you, you owe me!" Sarah's chest heaved, her fingers still gripping the broken bottleneck. Her uniform blouse was torn at the shoulder, buttons scattered across the grimy linoleum like scattered teeth. She'd come home from her double shift at the convenience store with her meager earnings clutched in one fist, exhausted, hungry, already dreading the confrontation she knew was waiting. But she hadn't expected this. Not this final, unforgivable crossing of a line she'd thought even Mr. Obi wouldn't dare approach. "You owe me your body if you can't give me money," he'd said, his breath reeking of cheap liquor and cigarettes, his pupils dilated with something more than just alcohol. What good is a daughter who can't even take care of her father? The memory of his hands on her thighs made her stomach turn. She'd grabbed the first thing she could reach, the empty bottle on the counter, and swung with every ounce of strength her exhausted body could summon. "Now, Mr. Obi touched his bleeding temple, looked at his red-stained fingers, and his face transformed into something monstrous. "I'm going to kill you." Sarah didn't wait to see if he meant it. She ran, out the apartment door, down 3 flights of stairs that reeked of mildew and despair, past the broken elevator and the flickering fluorescent lights that had been broken for months. Her feet hit the pavement, and she ran into the soul night, into the rain that had started falling in sheets, cold and cleansing and utterly indifferent to her terror. She had no phone. Mr. Obi had smashed it weeks ago in one of his rages. No money, she'd dropped her earnings in the apartment. No destination. Just the primal imperative to run, 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 until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, and the world stopped trying to devour her whole. She didn't know how long she ran. Time became meaningless, measured only in heartbeats and gasping breaths, and the slap of her worn sneakers against wet pavement. The city blurred around her neon signs, reflecting in puddles the distant sound of traffic, the occasional curious stare from pedestrians who saw a young woman running through the rain with a torn shirt and wild eyes, and decided very quickly that this was not their problem. When she finally stopped, bent double and retching from exertion, Sarah found herself in a part of Seoul she didn't recognize. The buildings here were different, sleeker, more expensive, the kind of neighborhood where her convenience store paycheck wouldn't cover a week's rent in the smallest apartment. And directly in front of her, rising like something out of a fever dream, stood a building made almost entirely of glass, the Crystal Pavilion. She read the name etched in elegant Hangul on the brass plaque near the entrance, though she had no context for what it meant. Through the rain-streaked glass walls, she could see lights warm, golden, impossibly inviting. And people, beautiful people in beautiful clothes, moving through the space with the kind of casual elegance that came from never having worried about money or survival or fathers who drank themselves into monsters. Sarah should have turned away, should have found a subway station or a 24-hour cafe or anywhere else to wait out the night and figure out what came next. But she was so cold, so tired, and the sight of that warmth drew her forward like a moth to flame. The doors were unlocked. She slipped inside, dripping rainwater onto marble floors so polished. She could see her reflection, bruised cheek, torn clothes, hair plastered to her skull. She looked like exactly what she was, a victim, a survivor, someone who had no business being in a place like this. "Oh my God, look at her!" The whisper came from a cluster of women standing near an elaborate fountain in the pavilion's center. They were stunning. Every one of them designer dresses, professional makeup, the kind of carefully maintained beauty that required both money and time. They stared at Sarah with expressions ranging from disgust to pity to something that might have been fear. How did she get in here? Security should have stopped her at the door. Is she bleeding? Sarah wanted to explain, to apologize, to leave, but before she could move, a door opened at the far end of the pavilion and 3 men emerged. They wore black suits that fit like they'd been tailored to their bodies, and they moved with a synchronization that suggested military training or something similar. The man in the center was older, perhaps 50, with silver streaking his black hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they touched. Those eyes found Sarah and stopped. The pavilion went silent. The silver-haired man walked toward her, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Sarah's survival instinct screamed at her to run again, but her legs had turned to water. She could only stand there, trembling, as he approached and stopped an arm's length away, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like an insect pinned to a board. "What's your name?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but it carried a weight that made the question feel like a command. "Sarah. And what are you doing here, Sarah?" I don't know. I was running and I saw the lights and I just..." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'll leave." "You're injured." It wasn't a question. His gaze moved over her torn clothes, her bruised face, the way she was shaking. "Who hurt you?" "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Something in his tone made Sarah's eyes snap up to meet his. There was no pity there, no disgust. Just a cold, calculating assessment that reminded her uncomfortably of a predator, deciding whether something was prey or threat. "My father," she heard herself say. "He tried to, I fought back. I ran." The man nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. Then he turned to address the room at large, his voice carrying to every corner of the pavilion. "The selection is over. This one will carry the successor." Chaos erupted. The beautiful women began talking all at once, their voices rising in disbelief and outrage. "You can't be serious!" one of them shrieked, her perfect makeup cracking with fury. "Look at her! She's a nobody! She's damaged! She's exactly what he needs," the silver-haired man said calmly. He gestured to his companions, who immediately moved to flank Sarah. Someone who knows how to survive, someone who's already proven she'll fight back when cornered. Someone with nothing to lose. Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face because he turned back to her with something that might have been a smile, though it held no warmth. "Welcome to your new life, Sarah. I am Dae-hyun, right hand to the Iron King, and you've just been selected to bear his heir." Before she could process those words, before she could ask what they meant or scream or try to run again, strong hands gripped her arms not painfully, but firmly enough that resistance was clearly not an option. She was guided through a side door, down a corridor that smelled of expensive cologne and something darker underneath, into an elevator that descended so far she thought they might be going to the center of the earth. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world that shouldn't exist. The underground facility was enormous, a labyrinth of corridors and rooms carved from stone and steel, lit by recessed lighting that cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. The air was climate-controlled, tastefully scented, and utterly silent, except for the whisper of ventilation and the soft footfalls of the men escorting her. They passed doors marked with Hangul characters she couldn't read, windows that looked into rooms she couldn't quite see clearly, and eventually arrived at what appeared to be a medical suite. "Sit," Dae-hyun instructed, gesturing to an examination table. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sat, not from obedience but because she literally couldn't stand anymore. A woman in pristine white scrubs entered a doctor, Sarah realized, noting the medical equipment, the sterile smell, the practiced efficiency with which she began examining Sarah's injuries. "Bruising on the face and arms," the doctor murmured, her gloved hands gentle but thorough. "Torn clothing, signs of struggle. No sexual trauma, thank God." She looked at Dae-hyun. "She'll need treatment for the bruises and possibly therapy for the wound. Psychological trauma, but physically she's intact. Good. Clean her up, treat the injuries, and prepare a room for her. She'll stay here until we're certain she's suitable." "Wait," Sarah finally found her voice. "I don't understand what's happening. What is this place? Who is the Iron King? What do you mean I'm supposed to bear his heir?" Dae-hyun studied her for a long moment, then nodded to the doctor, who discreetly left the room. When they were alone, or as alone as one could be in a facility that undoubtedly had cameras everywhere, he pulled up a chair and sat, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "The Iron King rules the largest organized crime syndicate in South Korea," he said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "Gambling, protection, entertainment, real estate, pharmaceuticals, both legal and otherwise. His reach extends to Japan, China, and increasingly into the West. He is feared, respected, and utterly untouchable by law enforcement because he owns half of them and has enough dirt on the other half to bury them if they step out of line." Sarah's mouth went dry. Every few years, the Iron King requires an heir. Not out of sentiment or desire for family, but because power demands continuity. A successor ensures that the empire he's built doesn't collapse into chaos when he's gone or if he's incapacitated. The selection process is rigorous. Women are vetted, tested, observed. They must be intelligent, resilient, and capable of surviving in a world where weakness means death. "I'm not any of those things," Sarah whispered. I work at a convenience store. I barely finished high school. I'm nobody." "You survived an abusive household," Daehyun countered. "You fought back against a man twice your size when he threatened you. You ran through the streets of Seoul in the rain with no destination, no resources, and no plan except survival. And when you stumbled into the selection by pure chance, you didn't faint or grovel or try to flatter your way into safety. You stood there and told the truth." He leaned forward slightly. The other women in that pavilion were beautiful, educated, connected. They came from wealthy families or criminal organizations seeking alliance through marriage. They were trained for this. But not one of them has truly suffered. Not one of them knows what it means to fight for every breath. The Iron King doesn't need a porcelain doll. He needs someone who won't break when the world tries to destroy her. He needs you. The words should have been flattering. Instead, they felt like a prison sentence. "And if I refuse?" Daehyun's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Then you go back to whatever life you were running from. Back to your father. Back to the streets. Back to a world where you have nothing and no one." He paused. "Or you stay here, where you'll be protected, provided for, and guaranteed a future for yourself and your child. The choice is yours, Sarah. But understand this, there are no second chances. If you walk out that door, you'll never be allowed back." Sarah closed her eyes. Her father's face swam in her memory, rage-twisted, drunk, dangerous. The tiny apartment with its broken elevator and flickering lights. The convenience store job that paid barely enough to keep them fed. The endless, grinding poverty that wore away at her soul like water eroding stone. What kind of life would she be returning to? And what kind of life was she accepting if she stayed? "I need to know more," she said, opening her eyes. "About him. About what exactly you expect from me. About what happens after." Daehyun nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. "You'll meet him tomorrow. The Iron King will explain the terms himself. For tonight, rest, heal, eat something. You're safe here, Sarah. Safer than you've been in a very long time." He stood and moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. "One more thing. Your father filed a missing person report 3 hours ago. My sources tell me he's contacted the police, claiming you attacked him unprovoked and stole money before fleeing. He's painting himself as the victim. Rage, hot and bitter, flooded through Sarah's chest. Of course he had. Of course, Mr. Obi would twist reality, would play the injured father, would try to drag her back into his orbit where he could continue to bleed her dry. "We can make him disappear," Daehyun said quietly. "One word from the Iron King and your father becomes a memory. No one would question it. Men like him vanish from the streets every day." The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrible. "No," Sarah said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Not yet. Just keep him away from me. Please." Daehyun's lips curved in what might have been approval. "As you wish." Then he was gone, and Sarah was alone in the medical suite with her thoughts and her fear, and the growing realization that her life had just taken a turn into something she couldn't begin to comprehend. The doctor returned with warm clothes, soft cotton pants, and a sweater that felt like luxury against her skin, and treated her injuries with practiced efficiency. Antiseptic stung against the cuts on her arms. Ice packs numbed the worst of the bruising. Pain medication took the edge off the throbbing in her skull. When it was done, Sarah was escorted to a room that made her want to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The space was larger than her entire apartment had been. A massive bed dominated one wall, piled with pillows and covered in sheets that probably cost more than she made in a month. There was a private bathroom with a soaking tub, a sitting area with a plush couch, and a wall of windows that looked out onto what appeared to be an underground garden, plants and trees growing under artificial sunlight, creating an oasis in the depths of the earth. "You'll find clothes in the closet," a young woman told. Her, one of the staff who'd appeared as if summoned. If you need anything, press the call button by the bed. Someone will respond immediately. Then Sarah was alone again. She should have been terrified. Should have been planning escape routes or demanding to leave or doing something, anything, other than what she actually did, which was walk to that enormous bed, collapse onto sheets that felt like clouds, and sleep for 14 hours straight. When she woke, there was food waiting on a tray, rice, soup, banchan, and tea that smelled of jasmine and honey. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind spinning with questions and possibilities and the surreal nature of her situation. After eating, she showered in the bathroom, letting water as hot as she could stand wash away the grime and fear and exhaustion that clung to her skin. The mirror showed her bruises in full bloom, now purple and yellow blossoms across her cheek, her arms, her ribs, evidence of Mr. Obi's violence, proof that she'd fought back. She'd just finished dressing the closet, had been stocked with clothes in her exact size, which should have been creepy but mostly just felt practical when a knock at the door announced Daehyun's return. The Iron King will see you now. Her stomach dropped. Right now? Right now. There was no point in arguing. Sarah followed Daehyun through the underground facility, noting details she'd missed in her exhausted haze the night before. Security cameras at every intersection. Guards posted at strategic points, all wearing the same black suits, all watching with the same predatory alertness. The place was a fortress, she realized. A kingdom carved beneath Seoul, invisible to the world above. They stopped at an enormous set of double doors carved from dark wood and inlaid with silver. Daehyun knocked once, waited, then pushed them open. The office beyond was studies in controlled power, dark furniture, bookshelves lining the walls, a massive desk, positioned to command the room. And behind that desk, silhouetted against a wall of screens showing what appeared to be security feeds from across the city, sat a man who made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Kang Min-sok was not what she expected. The Iron King was young, mid-30s at most, which seemed impossible for someone who supposedly ruled an empire. His face was sharp, beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful, all clean lines and precise angles. Black hair fell across his forehead in artful disarray. He wore a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and when he turned to look at her, his eyes were the color of winter, gray and cold and utterly merciless. "Sit," he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, which somehow made it more frightening than if he'd shouted. Sarah sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands clenched in her lap to keep them from shaking. Min-sok studied her in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then he opened a folder on his desk and began reading aloud. Han Sarah, 23 years old, mixed heritage Korean mother, Nigerian father, dropped out of university after one semester due to financial hardship, currently employed at a convenience store in Nawan-gu, working double shifts to support her alcoholic father. No criminal record, no known gang affiliations, no debts except the ones her father has accumulated in her name without her knowledge. He looked up. Clean, hard-working, and profoundly unlucky in her choice of family. Sarah said nothing. What could she say? Daehyun tells me you refused his offer to eliminate your father. I don't want him dead, she managed. I just want him gone. Interesting distinction. Min-sok closed the folder. You have principles. That's either admirable or foolish. I haven't decided which yet. Why me? The question burst out before she could stop it. All those women last night were beautiful and educated and everything I'm not. Why would you choose someone like me? Because they came to the Crystal Pavilion hoping to be chosen, Min-sok said simply. You stumbled in by accident, terrified and injured and looking for shelter from the rain. Because they've spent their lives learning how to please men like me. You've spent your life learning how to survive men like your father. And because when Daehyun offered you safety and resources in exchange for bearing my heir, your first question wasn't about money or status or power. It was about what I expected from you. He stood and walked around the desk, perching on its edge directly in front of her. The proximity made her want to lean back, but she forced herself to hold still. I need an heir, Sarah. A successor to ensure my empire survives whatever comes next. I don't need a wife or a partner or a love match. I need a healthy child from a mother who won't break under the pressure of this life. Daehyun believes you're that woman. Now I need to decide if I agree. And if you don't, then you leave with enough money to start over somewhere your father can't find you. A consolation prize for your trouble. It should have been the easy choice, take the money and run. But Sarah found herself thinking about the room they'd given her, the safety of these underground halls, the way Daehyun had promised protection from Mr. Obi. About the child Min-sok spoke of so clinically, and what kind of life that child might have in this world of power and danger. "What exactly would you expect from me?" she asked. "You'll undergo artificial insemination using my genetic material. You'll live here in the Blackstone estate throughout the pregnancy under the care of my medical staff. You'll eat properly, exercise moderately, and do nothing that might endanger the child. When the baby is born, you'll remain here for the first year while nursing and bonding. After that, we'll reassess." "Reassess what?" "Whether you stay or go, whether you want to be involved in the Porter child's life, or prefer to leave with enough money to build whatever future you choose. The decision will be yours." It was all so cold, so transactional, no mention of romance or family or anything resembling normal human connection, just a business arrangement with biological imperatives. "And if I agree," Sarah said slowly, "I'd be signing away my freedom, living here on your terms, under your control, carrying a child for a man I don't know and probably wouldn't like if I did. Yes." The blunt honesty was almost refreshing. "But I'd be safe," she continued. "Fed, protected, given medical care and resources I could never afford on my own. And after it's over, I'd have options I don't currently possess." "Yes." Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the alternative, returning to the streets with nothing, finding another convenience store job in another neighborhood, always looking over her shoulder for Mr. Obi, living paycheck to paycheck until the next crisis broke her completely. Or worse, Mr. Obi finding her, dragging her back, finishing what he'd started. When she opened her eyes, Min-sok was watching her with that winter gaze, waiting. "I'll do it," she said. "But I have conditions." One elegant eyebrow rose. "You're negotiating with me?" "You said the decision was mine. That implies I have some power in this arrangement." She took a breath. "I want my father dealt with, not killed, just removed from my life permanently. I want confirmation that he can never find me or hurt me again. And I want regular updates on the pregnancy, not just from doctors, but from you. If I'm carrying your heir, you don't get to treat me like an incubator and ignore me for 9 months. Min-sok's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Anything else? After the baby is born, if I decide to stay involved, I want a say in how they're raised. Not complete control, but input. This child is going to be mine too, and I won't just be a vessel you thank and dismiss." The silence stretched. Daehyun, still standing by the door, looked vaguely impressed. Min-sok's expression remained unreadable. Then the Iron King extended his hand. "Agreed. Your father will be relocated to a facility where he can receive treatment for his alcoholism. He'll be monitored to ensure he never contacts you again. You'll receive weekly updates on your health and the pregnancy's progress. And if you choose to remain after the birth, we'll discuss co-parenting arrangements." Sarah stared at his hand, then at his face, searching for deception or mockery and finding only cool professionalism. This was a deal he'd honor, she realized, because men like Kang Min-sok didn't break their word. They didn't need to. Their reputation was built on being more terrifying than any lie. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, utterly confident. "Welcome to the Blackstone estate," he said. "Try not to die here. It might have been a joke. With Min-sok, it was impossible to tell." The next week passed in a blur of medical examinations, legal documents, and preparations that made Sarah feel like she was preparing for a space mission rather than pregnancy. Doctors took blood samples, performed ultrasounds, explained the insemination procedure with clinical detachment. Lawyers appeared with contracts written in language so dense she needed it translated 3 times before she understood she was signing away rights to privacy and freedom of movement for the duration of the pregnancy while gaining protection and financial security in return. Through it all, Min-sok remained a distant presence. She'd see him occasionally in the corridors or on security monitors, always surrounded by men in black suits, always moving with purpose toward some crisis or meeting or problem that needed his attention. He never spoke to her directly after that first meeting, and Sarah told herself she was grateful for the distance. The insemination happened on a Tuesday. Sarah lay on an examination table in a private medical suite, while doctors and nurses moved around her with efficient precision. The procedure itself was painless, almost anticlimactic over in minutes, followed by instructions to remain horizontal for 30 minutes while the genetic material had the best chance to take hold. When everyone left and she was alone, Sarah stared at the ceiling and tried to process that she might be pregnant, that she might be carrying the heir to a criminal empire, that her life had fundamentally changed in ways she still couldn't quite comprehend. She thought about Mr. Obi, hopefully beginning treatment at whatever facility Minsok had arranged. She thought about the convenience store and whether they'd noticed her absence yet. She thought about the future, a child growing inside her, a life she'd be responsible for bringing into this strange, dangerous world. And she wondered if she'd just made the best decision of her life or the worst. 2 weeks later, the pregnancy test came back positive. Sarah took the news sitting in the garden, the underground oasis that had become her refuge during the waiting period. She'd spent hours here, reading books from the estate's library, walking the paths, occasionally crying when the isolation and uncertainty became too much. Now she sat on a stone bench beneath artificial sunlight and felt nothing, everything, terror and wonder and resignation all at once. Congratulations. She looked up to find Minsok standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable as ever. He'd apparently received the news before her. Thanks, I guess? Sarah's laugh came out slightly hysterical. This is so weird. I'm pregnant with your baby and I don't even know your favorite color. Black. Of course it is. Minsok moved closer, stopping at the opposite end of the bench. Not sitting, just standing there like he wasn't quite sure what to do with himself. It was the first crack she'd seen in his perfect control. Are you well? He asked. The doctors said you might experience morning sickness soon. I'm fine. Tired, but fine. Good. Silence fell between them, not comfortable but not hostile either. More like two strangers realizing they were trapped in an elevator together and needed to figure out how to coexist. Why did you really choose me? Sarah asked quietly. And don't give me that line about survival instincts and principles. There's something else. Minsok was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my mother was like you, poor, uneducated, trapped in a situation she couldn't escape. My father saw her serving drinks at a hostess bar and decided he wanted her. She bore me, raised me for the first 5 years of my life, and then, he stopped, jaw tightening. She tried to leave. He killed her for it. The words landed like physical blows. I don't want to repeat his mistakes, Minsok continued, his voice carefully emotionless. I don't want a woman who's here out of ambition or greed, or because she's been trained to tolerate monsters. I want someone who chooses this life knowing exactly how dark it is. Someone who survives not despite the darkness, but because of their own light. He finally looked at her, and for just a moment, his winter eyes thawed. You're that person, Sarah. And I swear to you, whatever else happens, you'll never be trapped the way my mother was. You'll always have a choice. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah alone in the garden with tears streaming down her face and the first real sense of hope she'd felt in years. The first trimester was hell. Morning sickness hit Sarah like a freight train, leaving her nauseous and exhausted and utterly miserable for weeks. She spent most days in her room, emerging only for doctor visits and occasional walks when her stomach settled enough to tolerate movement. The estate staff brought her bland food and ginger, tea and sympathetic looks that made her want to throw things. Minsok, to his credit, kept his promise about updates. He appeared every few days, usually in the evening, to ask about her health and receive reports from the doctors. The conversations were brief, professional, and gradually became less uncomfortable. Sarah learned that he was methodical about everything, that he had an eidetic memory for details, and that he drank his coffee black with no sugar because life is bitter enough without pretending otherwise. She also learned that he was surprisingly easy to shock. I want tteokbokki, she announced one evening when he stopped by during one of his rounds. It was week 7 of the pregnancy, and the morning sickness had momentarily abated, replaced by ravenous hunger. Minsok blinked. The doctors recommended bland foods. The doctors can recommend whatever they want. I want tteokbokki, with extra gochugaru, and fish cakes, and that really spicy sauce that makes your eyes water. I'm growing your heir. Sarah interrupted, channeling every ounce of sass she'd suppressed over the past weeks. "The least you can do is feed me properly." Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe amusement. "You're demanding food from the Iron King. I'm demanding food from the father of my child. There's a difference." He studied her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone and made a call. 20 minutes later, a spread of tteokbokki appeared, prepared by what Sarah suspected was one of Seoul's finest chefs given how perfect it tasted. She ate with single-minded determination, while Min-sok watched with an expression that might have been fascination. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "Yeah, well, pregnancy brings out my charming side. Wait until I hit the 3rd trimester. I'll probably demand you build me a palace made of chocolate." His lips twitched. Actually twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. After that, something shifted between them. The distance remained, but the ice began to crack. Min-sok's visits became slightly longer, their conversations slightly less formal. He told her about the business, nothing too detailed, but enough that she understood the scope of his empire. She told him about her life before, about the convenience store and her hopeless attempts to keep Mr. Obi sober, and her secret dream of finishing university someday. "You could study now," Min-sok suggested during one of these conversations. "Online courses. The estate has an excellent library and unlimited internet access. While pregnant with your heir, why not? Your brain doesn't stop working just because your body is busy." The suggestion was so practical and unexpected that Sarah found herself looking into university programs the next day. Within a week, she was enrolled in online courses for literature and history, studying between bouts of nausea and doctor visits. It gave her something to focus on besides the growing swell of her belly and the surreal nature of her situation. The 2nd trimester brought relief from the morning sickness and a new set of challenges. Sarah's body changed rapidly. Her clothes stopped fitting, her back ached constantly, and she developed cravings that ranged from reasonable to utterly bizarre. Through it all, Min-sok remained a steady presence, though Sarah noticed he seemed increasingly uncertain how to handle her. Like the night she woke at 3 in the morning craving jjajangmyeon and wandered the estate looking for the kitchen, only to find Min-sok in his office, surrounded by documents and looking exhausted. "Can't sleep?" he asked when she appeared in his doorway. "The baby is using my bladder as a trampoline and I need noodles. Can't you sleep?" "Gang war in Busan. Territorial dispute. I'm trying to resolve it before people start dying." He rubbed his eyes. "Why are you out of bed?" "I just told you. Noodles. It's 3 in the morning. The baby doesn't care about time zones." Min-sok stared at her for a moment, then pressed a button on his desk. "Kitchen. Prepare jjajangmyeon. Bring it to my office." He looked at Sarah. "Sit. You shouldn't be walking around alone this late. I'm pregnant, not made of glass. You're pregnant with my heir, which makes you the most valuable person in this building aside from me. Sit." Sarah sat, more because her feet hurt than because she was following orders. They waited in silence until the food arrived, a steaming bowl of black bean noodles that smelled like heaven. Sarah ate while Min-sok returned to his documents, and somehow the quiet companionship felt more intimate than any conversation they'd had. "Why did you become this?" she asked eventually, gesturing at the office, the papers, the weight of empire that seemed to press down on him. "This Iron King thing? I didn't become it. I was born to it." Min-sok leaned back in his chair. "My father was the Iron King before me. When he died, I inherited everything. The organization, the territory, the enemies. I was 23 years old and utterly unprepared. I either had to become what the position demanded or watch everything collapse into chaos and war. So you chose to become someone else. I chose to survive. The man I was before wouldn't have lasted a week in this world." Sarah set down her chopsticks. "Do you miss him? That man you were before?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, every single day, something in his voice, something raw and honest and profoundly lonely made Sarah's heart ache. Without thinking, she stood and walked around the desk, placing a hand on his shoulder. He went rigid under her touch, unused to comfort, unsure how to accept it. "Maybe he's not as gone as you think," she said softly. "Maybe he's just hiding under all that black clothing and intimidating silence, waiting for a reason to come back out." Min-sok looked up at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw past the Iron King to the man beneath, scarred, weary, desperately trying to hold an empire together through sheer force of will. "Go back to bed, Sarah," he said quietly. "You need rest." But his hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his shoulder, just for a moment, before he gently pulled away. Sarah left the office but couldn't shake the image of him sitting there alone, surrounded by documents and decisions that could mean life or death for dozens of people. She found herself thinking about him more after that night, not just as the Iron King or the father of her child, but as a person. Complex, damaged, lonely despite being surrounded by people who would die at his command. It was dangerous thinking. Getting emotionally invested in Minseok would complicate everything. This was supposed to be a transaction, a means to survival, nothing more. But her heart, apparently, hadn't received that memo. The confrontation came during her 6th month of pregnancy. Sarah was in the garden, reading a book for her literature course, when alarms began blaring throughout the estate. Guards appeared from nowhere, weapons drawn, moving with military precision toward the main entrance. Daehyun materialized beside her, his face grim. "Come with me, now. What's happening?" "Your father found you." Terror, cold and absolute, flooded through Sarah's body. "How? Does it matter?" "He's at the gates demanding to see you, and he's not alone. Come on." They rushed through the corridors, Daehyun practically carrying her when her pregnant body couldn't move fast enough. They ended up in a secure room lined with monitors showing different angles of the estate's entrance. On the screens, Sarah could see Mr. Obi, older, thinner, but unmistakably her father standing with 2 other men who looked like low-level thugs, all of them shouting at the guards who blocked the gates. And standing in front of them, calm and cold as winter, was Minseok. "Turn on the audio," Daehyun ordered. "My daughter, Mr. Obi was screaming, his accent thick with rage and alcohol. "You kidnapped her! I want her back!" "Your daughter is here of her own free will," Minseok replied, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos. "She chose to stay. She signed documents confirming this choice. You have no legal claim." "Legal? You think I care about legal? She's my daughter. She owes me." "She owes you nothing except perhaps revenge for years of abuse." "Mr. Obi's face turned purple with rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Sarah needs to come home. She needs to take care of her father." "Sarah needs to take care of herself and the child she's carrying, neither of which involves you." There was a pause. Then Mr. Obi's expression shifted, became calculating and cruel. "If she doesn't come out, I'll go to the media. Tell them how you kidnapped a young woman, how you're holding her prisoner. I'll make you a story, Iron King. And even you can't silence every journalist in Seoul." Minseok's laugh was cold enough to freeze blood. "You're threatening me? In front of my estate, surrounded by my men, with evidence of your abuse documented by doctors and lawyers? Please, proceed. I'm fascinated to see how this ends for you. I'm her father. You're a drunk and a predator who tried to rape his own daughter when she couldn't provide you with money. Don't insult both of us by pretending you care about Sierra's well-being." In the monitoring room, Sierra's hands were shaking. She'd known Mr. Obi would eventually come looking, but hearing him twist reality, claim victimhood, demand she return to that nightmare, it made her want to vomit. "I have to go out there," she said. "Absolutely not," Daehyun replied immediately. "He'll never stop unless I face him, unless I make it clear that I chose this, that he has no power over me anymore. Sarah, please." Something in her voice must have convinced him because Daehyun pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, Sarah was being escorted to the gates, flanked by guards who looked ready to kill at the slightest provocation. When she emerged into the late afternoon light, Mr. Obi's face went from rage to shock to something that might have been genuine emotion. "Sarah, sweetheart, I've been so worried. Come here, let's go home." "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. Sarah stood as tall as her pregnant body would allow, meeting Mr. Obi's eyes across the distance. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I chose to stay here. I chose this life. And I choose to never see you again." "You don't know what you're saying." Mr. Obi took a step forward, but stopped when every guard simultaneously raised their weapons. "These people have brainwashed you. They're criminals." "And what are you?" Sarah's voice rose. All the rage and pain and fear of Years finally breaking free. You stole from me, beat me, tried to... Her voice cracked. You stopped being my father the night you put your hands on me. Whatever happens to you now, whatever the Iron King decides, you deserve. Mr. Obi's face contorted. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I sacrificed for you. You sacrificed nothing, Minsok interjected, stepping between Sarah and her father like a living shield. And now you've made your final mistake. Dae-hyun, escort Mr. Obi to the facility, ensure he completes his treatment program, and make it clear that any attempt to contact Sarah or speak publicly about her will result in consequences he won't survive. You can't do this, Mr. Obi struggled as guards. Minsok's guards gripped his arms. I'm her father. I have rights. You have what I allow you to have. Be grateful I'm showing mercy at all. They dragged Mr. Obi away, his shouts fading into the distance. The two thugs who'd come with him exchanged glances, then wisely decided to leave before they became collateral damage. Within minutes, the entrance was clear, quiet, as if the confrontation had never happened. Sarah stood frozen, trembling, tears streaming down her face. She'd done it. She'd faced Mr. Obi and survived. She was free. Then her legs gave out. Minsok caught her before she hit the ground, his arms surprisingly gentle as he lifted her against his chest. I've got you. You're safe. I promise, Sarah. You're safe. She buried her face against his shoulder and wept for the father she'd lost years ago, for the girl she'd been before survival became her only goal, for the future that suddenly seemed possible. Minsok held her through it all, one hand cradling her head, the other supporting her weight, murmuring quiet reassurances that might have been meaningless if they hadn't been so desperately needed. When she finally calmed enough to breathe, Minsok carried her inside, ignoring Dae-hyun's pointed looks and the guards' shocked expressions. He brought her to her room, set her gently on the bed, and sat beside her while she caught her breath. Thank you, Sarah managed, for everything, for protecting me, for dealing with him, for not making me go back. I told you, Minsok said quietly. You'll always have a choice here. Always. I know. I needed to hear it again. He nodded, then stood to leave. Sarah's hand shot out, catching his wrist. Stay, please, just for a little while. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, uncertainty, and something else she couldn't quite name. But he sat back down, and they remained like that as evening turned to night, two broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. The third trimester was torture. Sarah's body swelled to proportions that made movement difficult and sleep nearly impossible. Her back ached constantly. Her ankles disappeared. She couldn't see her feet anymore, and the baby seemed determined to use her ribs as a punching bag. Through it all, Minsok became an unexpected source of support. He started spending more time in her wing of the estate, ostensibly to monitor the pregnancy, but really, Sarah suspected, because he was as anxious as she was about the approaching birth. He'd arrive in the evenings with reports or documents, work quietly while she studied or read, and their conversations gradually became less about the pregnancy and more about everything else: books, politics, philosophy, the nature of power and mercy, and what it meant to be human in a world that rewarded cruelty. You're different than you were, Sarah observed one night. 8 months pregnant, unable to get comfortable no matter how many pillows she used. She'd given up on sleep and found Minsok in the garden. He was sitting on her favorite bench, staring at nothing. Am I? Less cold, less scary, more, she struggled to find the word, present. You're carrying my child. It would be difficult to remain distant. That's not why. Sarah lowered herself onto the bench beside him, grunting at the effort. You're changing because you want to, because you're choosing to be more than what your position demands. Minsok was quiet, but his hand came to rest on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick beneath his palm. My mother used to tell me that every person is born good. That cruelty is learned, not innate. I didn't believe her. After everything I've seen, everything I've done, I was certain she was wrong. He met Sarah's eyes. But then you stumbled into my world, terrified and injured and completely unsuited for this life. And you didn't break. You adapted. You survived. You became stronger. And you did it without losing whatever essential goodness makes you who you are. I'm not that good, Sarah protested. You are, even now, after everything you've been through, you study literature and philosophy. You're kind to the staff. You make terrible jokes to lighten the mood when tension gets too high. You're proof that my mother was right, that goodness exists even in the darkest places. His hand was still on her belly, and Sarah covered it with her own. Maybe your mother would be proud of you too, she said softly, for choosing to protect rather than control, for giving me choices instead of chains, for becoming a better man than your father was. Minsok's expression flickered pain, hope, something raw and vulnerable. I don't know if I'm capable of being a good father. You're already better than mine was. The bar is low, but you're clearing it. That startled a laugh out of him, actual laughter, brief but genuine. Your sarcasm is showing. It's a defense mechanism, gets me through difficult conversations. Everything about you is a defense mechanism, says the man who built an underground fortress and calls himself the Iron King. They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands intertwined over the life they'd created, and Sarah realized with startling clarity that she'd fallen in love with him. With his complexity and contradictions, his strength and hidden softness, the way he was trying so hard to be better than the role he'd inherited. It was inconvenient and dangerous and completely unplanned. It was also absolutely terrifying. The birth was a nightmare. Sarah's water broke in the middle of the night, 3 weeks before her due date, and within hours she was in the medical suite, surrounded by doctors and nurses, while contractions tore through her body with increasing intensity. Pain became her entire universe, wave after wave of agony that made her scream, curse, and beg for relief that was slow in coming. Through it all, Minsok stayed. He shouldn't have been there. Birthing suites were no place for the Iron King, and a dozen people told him so, but he refused to leave. He held Sarah's hand while she squeezed hard enough to bruise, wiped sweat from her forehead, and let her scream at him when the pain became too much to contain. I hate you, she gasped between contractions. I hate you and your stupid air and this entire situation. I know. I'm sorry. You're doing so well. Don't you dare patronize me while I'm... Another contraction cut off her words, and she bore down with every ounce of strength she had left. Hours blurred together. The doctors gave updates 8 centimeters, 9. Almost there, but Sarah barely heard them. Her world had narrowed to pain and breathing, and Minsok's voice, steady and constant, telling her she could do this. She was strong enough, just a little more. And then, finally, impossibly, a cry split the air. It's a girl, the doctor announced, lifting a tiny, red-faced infant. You have a daughter. The world stopped. Minsok's face disappointment flickered across it so briefly. Sarah almost missed it, replaced quickly by something more complex. He'd wanted a son, she knew, an heir to match tradition and expectation, but what they had was a daughter, and as the doctor placed the baby in Sarah's arms, nothing else seemed to matter. She was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled and screaming her displeasure at being born, but perfect. Dark hair plastered to her skull, eyes squeezed shut, fists waving in the air like she was already ready to fight the world. Hi, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hi, baby, I'm your mom. Oh God, I'm your mom. Minsok moved closer, staring at the child with an expression Sarah had never seen before. Wonder and fear and something that looked almost like love. She's so small, he said. She's a newborn. They're supposed to be small. Can I... He stopped, uncertain. May I hold her? Sarah had never heard him ask permission for anything. She carefully transferred the baby to his arms, watching as he cradled the infant with surprising gentleness. The Iron King, feared by thousands, reduced to trembling nervousness by a 6-pound human. What should we call her? Sarah asked. Minsok studied his daughter's face, and slowly, his expression softened into something that might actually be a smile. Hana, he said. It means one, first, the beginning of something new. Hana, Sarah repeated, testing the name. It fit. Welcome to the world, Hana. Try not to let your father terrify you too much. Minsok's laugh was quiet but real. I make no promises. They stayed like that, new parents marveling at the impossibility of the life they'd created, while the medical staff bustled around them, and the world outside continued turning. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or dangers awaited, they'd face them together. The Blackstone estate had gained its heir, and against all odds, Sarah had found her home.